Hey, so I want to talk about a few things. It's interesting to me that the latest talking point against those of us in divested and BWE spaces is, well, you all need to show your work. Listen, if you understand anything about statistics, even if there were some of us in these spaces who were willing to do that, you'd have to understand something. If we were able to say, okay, X number of black women are living in certain situations because they found these channels, it would be such a small sample size that it wouldn't be statistically accurate enough to be a reflection of what's going on amongst black women as a whole in this country. If you want something like that, you need to look at the Pew Research data and the CDC marital data. Listen, a lot of these people that like to use these statistics, to throw mud at black women, they don't understand anything about the data that they're actually looking at. Okay? Because if you go to the data tab on a lot of those surveys, it'll tell you that because there's such a small number of black women in the country, dating and marital trends in a handful of metropolitan areas can skew the final result for the entire population of black women. The data confirms that black women that live in areas ranging from small towns to mid-sized metropolitan areas tend to have about an 80 to 85% chance of being married sometime between 30 and 35. Okay? So what this means is if more of us stopped moving to these places where we outnumber certain demographics of men by up to 12 to 1, and if, maybe over time you see more younger black women be more willing to expand their dating options, then you'll see the marital trends change even in those large metropolitan areas. Also, the marital data confirms that the number of black women in interracial marriages, or the percentage of black women in interracial marriages, is slowly increasing. You got about 12% of newly married black women now marrying across racial lines. And a lot of that is going to be for several reasons. I mean, maybe it's going to be because of things we've all observed in terms of the fact that, like I've said before, a lot of black men are not race loyal. It's also possibly going to be because maybe you have more and more black women moving to areas of the country where the pool of available bachelors may or may not always be black men. And then also there's some articles that suggest that maybe online dating is, creating more room for some black women to date and marry across racial lines. I mean, there was some statistic or some survey that was put out by OkCupid that said, what did it say? It suggested that according to the number of men surveyed on that site, they did not view black women as desirable. But what that survey did not show was whether or not the answers were different based on things like geographic location, the man's age, the man's education, so on and so forth. And so it's just interesting to see how all of that plays out. So when you see these people say show your work, just tell them to go look at the statistics and tell them to make sure they understand what they're looking at, okay? Outside of that, we have to get to this place where we don't assume that disagreements or differences in opinion mean that the sky is falling in divested and BWE spaces. In any sector on social media, regardless of the people's color, you see people have disagreements. You see people have differences in opinion, and that's just because everyone's not always going to think the same. And so we have to stop letting people use those differences in opinion as a reason to chip away at the entire space. And because a lot of times it's people observing disagreements, the disagreements who are not actually in the space. Another thing is we have to understand that wanting to have a layer of protection around our spaces does not equate to hatred. And when people start saying that the entire Divested and BWE space is about black male hatred, you have to understand that people, particularly women who think that way, are doing that because they're male-minded. Because it's typically men who look at women-centered movements and say, okay, well, anything that doesn't center around us is automatically about hating us. You see, that's a male mindset. So when you observe that in other women, other black women, I wouldn't be alarmed. Just understand that unfortunately we're going to encounter that quite often. I wouldn't engage in back and forths with people who would try to have you convince them that this is not about hatred. Anyone who is rationally thinking would understand that not being collective minded and being self first and loving yourself and wanting to improve yourself, none of that is about hating anyone else. And, understand as well that none of those people, from what I've seen, none of those people are going into spaces where you have men who don't like black women. You have none of them saying, oh, this space is all about black women hatred. If you're talking about saving yourselves, that means you hate black women. None of those people are doing that, which is very interesting to me. And another thing we have to understand, maybe on some level, people can view it as unfortunate, but it's reality. Everyone is not comfortable moving in large groups of people, So I've heard people say, oh, I think it would be cool if we could come together. Everybody doesn't think like that. Some people are just more comfortable either being to themselves, or some people are more comfortable just quietly supporting certain platforms, because people don't always want to feel like they have to come on to YouTube and feel like they have to pick sides, or they have to get involved in all this back and forth stuff like that. Because like I told y'all before recently, when you see these back and forths, sometimes it's best to stay neutral, or sometimes it's best to have your opinion but not be publicly involved, okay? Because you never know the outcome of any of this stuff, and you don't want to become so mentally and emotionally attached to other people's disagreements that it affects your ability to enjoy the space. Because that's what we should just be doing. Enjoy the space, enjoy the messages, enjoy the conversations, like who you like, support who you support, and understand that if somebody doesn't support the same people that you do, it doesn't mean that they're evil. It doesn't mean that they're hateful. It doesn't mean that, we can't come together because of these people. It just means we're different. We all have different interests. It is what it is. Now, do I think that there should be some rules of engagement when it comes to disagreements? Yes. But that's my opinion. I can't put that on anyone else. Okay? Anyway, I hope you all enjoy your weekend, and I will talk to y'all soon. Bye.